Welcome back to Humble Running. I wanted to do a bit of a different video here today. I wanted to do a pre-run impressions video on the new Salomon SLAB Genesis 2. As you can probably tell, this one's a little bit dusty. I couldn't help myself. I went out for a 13-mile half marathon, 13.1 actually, sunset run. Couldn't help myself. Had a new vest to test from Black Diamond and the shoe, so I wanted to film this before that, but got a little bit antsy. Before I get into it, I want to read off the specs here in my much-loved SLAB Genesis version 1. 9.2 ounces, 262 grams here. 9.6 ounces, 272 grams here with the version 2, so that's a 10-gram weight gain. I've got 30 to 22 8 mil drop on version 1. Spec is 3125 6 mil drop, so a reduction in drop here by 2 millimeters with version 2. This one has seen quite a lot of trail miles, quite a lot of racing miles. I believe I did Gross Glockner Ultra Trail in this shoe right here. Also a good portion of Palisades 100 miler. So very technical, very rough on the feet miles. My feet didn't do too well in this shoe over those longer ultra distances. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it is a little bit lower stack compared to some higher stack models that I would typically favor for those races, but they were kind of technical. So that's why I went with them. That being said, after those races and after a good amount of miles, I just re-measured these. I've got these at 28 at the heel. So given the 8 mil spec drop here with V1, that puts it at only 20 millimeters under the forefoot. So quite thin there. These I actually measured 1 mil lower, so that's within a margin of error compared to their spec stack, 30 millimeters at the heel. So that puts us at 30.24. So these shoes, as they are exactly measured today in front of you, you got a notable 4 mil increase under the forefoot and just a touch higher at the heel, 2 millimeters by my measurement. Both shoes, lost one there. This is the regular Genesis 2. Going to talk about that probably a little bit. Both shoes have 4.5 millimeter lugs underfoot. Now, this is the part I wanted to get into. I wanted to talk pre-run out of the box impressions. I didn't film it when I opened it, but I was going to talk about them new. First, straight out of the box, the toe box looked a little bit slimmer to me. If you recall, or probably as you are aware of, this shoe was notable from Salomon for being one of their wider models. Salomon has traditionally been known for having that slim Euro style fit in their shoes, and when this one came out, it was like, wow, Salomon finally came out with a wider toe box here, and that is one of the reasons why I did love this shoe. Very broad across. I shouldn't say very broad because the market has moved in such a way that a lot of the top super shoes, and also there's a lot of natural fitting, wider fitting style shoes out on the market, more so than there were at the time this shoe came out, but still for Salomon, quite a wide shoe. So one of the reasons I love it, just nice, spacious across the forefoot, and notably did not taper so much towards the toes, which is kind of a feature of Salomon shoes in the past. When I pulled this one out of the box, new SLAB version 2 here, it just seemed a little bit slimmer. I got the vibe and impression of this toe box here similar to what I got from this regular Genesis 2. Now, I do have different sizing here. I have these in equal sizing, US 9.5, EU 43 and a third. Again, I ran some long races in this one, but I still think I should have a 10 in this model. I did actually request a 10, but sample inventory was limited. I ended up receiving a 9.5, and it fits okay, but perhaps not for those longer distances. Again, we'll talk about that later. Having this shoe, of course, I have a little bit of space in this being US 10, so that would be more comfortable for me for ultra distances, but it still has the same kind of shape I talked about in my review. Check those out, a few videos where I was up in the Sawtooth running in this shoe. It was kind of hard to tell with all the gradations of colors and the white and the toe cap and all this different stuff. It was hard to tell if it was actually slim or not. It is kind of slim and a little bit low volume, especially over the front part of the toe box there. And just pulling them out of the box visually, I mean, I unbox a lot of shoes. I have a lot of shoes, so normally when I take a look at them out of the box, I have a good sense about them, and it just seemed like it had that same kind of slim, low volume over the toe shape as this regular Genesis 2. And looking at both of these in comparison, and obviously having had both of them, I have the opposite shoes on my feet right now. This is well worn in, of course, but I still think they changed the shape a little bit. You could almost see I don't have any padding anywhere inside this shoe, as if they were out of the box to puff them up a little. You can see how the material lays. It kind of like sits down. There's a little bump up over here where there's perhaps a little volume in this area, but it does slim, I think, a little bit more so than this one in the front of the toe box. And that was one area that was first noticeable, first impressions again here. Moving on to the bottom of the shoe, look at the ground platform. Look at those red areas there. It's so wide. Not wide compared to like ultra wide shoes that are out on the market, but compared to V1, this has that more kind of standard pulled in shape under the middle of the shoe, which enhanced, I would say, the flexibility of the shoe. This one is quite different. I was surprised to see how broad it was, essentially from the heel, almost the same width, maybe a slight flare back here, but right through the midfoot until you get to the ball of foot. That was especially noticeable out of the box. Next thing, obviously looking at that, was the flex of the shoe. You could see they went with this more protective style of flex, not just the ground platform we're talking about here. We're talking about how this affects the flex. It could be the width of the platform. You can see these red parts are rubber outsole pieces. This part here is not connected to the active chassis, but it does kind of wrap around the foot a little bit. Same here on this side. It wraps like this rubber outsole a little bit above the side of the foot there. So it's definitely hindering flex. This is more of that protective alpine type of design where you really want to kind of lock down the center of the foot and kind of inhibit twisting, add protection in that area if you are going to just like be jamming down on solid rock and sharp rocks and things like that. That's quite different from version 1, and that is obviously one of the features that I keyed in on out of the box. Check out my video. I did one of my first A/B, it was my first A/B comparison with the Prodigio Pro, and one of the reasons I felt like these two shoes were comparable is the amount of flex here. Like, it doesn't inherently flex right here, but there's definitely more flex starting earlier in this version 1. And the twisting aspect, with this being narrower, without having the outsole kind of peeking up on the edges of both sides as it does in this version 2 here, the shoe just twists easier, and that was part of the character of the shoe. You could land nice wide forefoot, nice ground feel up front, ground feel because it is a little thinner under the forefoot there, but your foot was able to kind of articulate, and that was a feature that I loved about this shoe. Quite concerning about this one, concerning in terms of if you like that element of twistiness and flexibility around the middle of the shoe, looking at this one straight out of the box, you don't quite get that. The level of twist, it's there, but I have to put more force to get some flex into it, and it's certainly not to the same degree as this version 1 here. So quite a difference here with this version 2. Next features, straight out of the box again. Obviously, this is an all black shoe. Not a huge fan of all black colorways. I know down the line, this shoe itself is obviously not that much lighter, but they did come out with a kind of white Courtney version. And I think even this being gray, this one is like, it's a little bit dusty now, but it is like all black, super black. So not crazy about that in the hotter and exposed temperatures I'm running in. Love to see a lighter version. Hope it doesn't take them as long to come out with a lighter version of this one. Quicklace system is roughly the same, but the garage is different. This one has the one here where it tucks in from the bottom. This is one of their nicer kind of tuck in from the bottom varieties here. I never had an issue with this one. Some of them can be a little bit tricky. I think usually in their kind of lower models, they give a wider garage, but a lot of times the laces cross over that little pocket at the top of the tongue there, and you have to kind of like work to get it in there. This one was a little smaller, a little bit higher. Never had an issue with this one. It was totally fine. This one, they went with this kind of top entry system. So the Quicklace comes through, the tab comes through, this little top entry lace garage here, quick lace garage, pull it through, and then you tuck it in from the top, which always makes it much easier. I feel like this is their most premium design. I think somebody commented that they prefer this one. They didn't think this one was as good, but for me, I always thought this one was better. It's just easier. You don't have any issues of trying to like tuck it under the upper row of laces, and I don't know, just feels more premium to me. So I like that update here. Looking at the active chassis, which is a main feature of this one, this was seen kind of this type of shape and design was seen in Genesis version 1, now similarly in Genesis version 2 here. You can see this high riding sidewall here, and that is something that is quite a difference when I was looking at this shoe. This was the first model to kind of use that design, I believe, from Salomon. This kind of thing here looks a little bit weird, being a kind of rectangle block there, but it was effectively doing the same thing. This is just an iteration of it. It seems to ride at an angle, perhaps ride a little bit higher. I think it is bigger. It definitely is bigger than that one. So they've refined that chassis design on the lateral side. On the medial side, it's somewhat similar, but I think it does come up higher here. It's maybe hard to tell. This one kind of has like a sharp swoop to it, and this one kind of has a more gradual slope, but it seems to be just as high, and it is pretty substantial. Just looking at this one out of the box compared to V1, again, I just got the impression that the chassis, as you will call it, like this side and this side here, it just seemed to be a little bit more bulked up compared to this one. And again, I'm accounting for the fact that this area is much wider here compared to version 1, and also I was obviously articulating it in hand, and I was also kind of feeling out that flex. So noticeable differences there. Let me head over, now that this is where kind of my pre-run impressions, even though I'm sharing them with you now after I've already run a half marathon in this shoe, not a race, just a training run there. But now I'm gonna get into some post-run impressions as I have the opposite pairs on my feet here, and we'll talk about if some of those first impressions matched up with what I felt after my first run. All right, had to walk across the wet grass there. That's what that little moisture is there. Let's see what I'm talking about here. These laces kind of come over that, but I find like this one is kind of high compared to some of their other garages, so I never had an issue with their quick lace garage in version 1. Version 2 here. Again, both of these are US 9.5, EU 43 1/3. I feel like this is just a lot easier to tuck it into the top here. So if you'll notice, I do notice, and I do feel like, again, this one has plenty of miles in it, a little bit broken in. Maybe this will change over time, but I don't suspect to the degree of this one. Even just looking at them in the same size, the space here, I could tell between this row here, the eyelets down here, is definitely a touch wider than here. And inside the shoe, I could just feel it in my foot. I could feel my base of my foot, ball of my foot below the toes. I could feel it spreading out more as I'm stepping onto the ground here, and that is an aspect that I love about this shoe, and that's why I was comparing it to the Prodigio Pro, which also has similar width in this area. Very nice ground feel. Again, I'm measuring 20 millimeters of stack underfoot, so you really feel the ground in this model here. At 24 here, I think the foam also, OptiFoam squared or OptiFoam 2 here, supposedly an eTPU foam similar to or similarly named to their Aero models, Aeroglide 4 gravel models, but this is certainly not the same foam, certainly not the same formulation, even though they are calling it OptiFoam squared or whatever. It's definitely firmer. You don't have that beaded eTPU bounce in this model here, but noticeably more under the forefoot here. I don't have the same level of both expansion of the foot due to the width, more width in this model for sure, and I also have 4 millimeters extra based on my measurements of these shoes here today underfoot. So you're going to get enhanced protection under the forefoot, a little bit more cushion, not in the softer sense, but in the just pure volume of foam underfoot. Other features here: active chassis on the run. I talked about the chassis looking a little more substantial out of the box, and it definitely felt that way on the run. The contour here, I wouldn't say it's a contour under the arch. It's some combination of this medial side being a little bit wider and this perhaps being more bulked up. I got the feeling of contour like on the inside edge of my foot, not directly under the foot. It was more like the inside edge, and maybe that's just what they're going for with this model here, really giving you the feeling of this chassis now riding along the side of your foot. It's much more subtle in this one. I feel like this was kind of here as an extension of the midsole, but it is quite flexible. It seems more bulky in here, and not just this part right here compared to this part in version 1. This one, the active chassis felt like it just was there to kind of guide the foot, but not be so overbearing. In this model, it does feel like it's more so trying to control your foot, like not this part, but down here along the edge. On the run, I was feeling it on both inside edges of my foot, as if it was almost kind of keeping my foot almost canted a little bit outward for some type of support aspect. Again, I'm talking about this Gen 2 here. I'm looking at it from above here, and it's just like this is straight to the ground with, whereas this one kind of tapers in under the foot. And even as I'm articulating my foot here, there's just a lot more movement, more flexibility in the middle of the shoe in this one. So the chassis aspect was something I definitely noticed on the run here, and the ground platform width here. Let me grab the other shoe. It just seems like there's more of an aspect of trying to hold the foot like this kind of like U shape from below, give like a bracing type of support of the middle of the foot in this version 2 that I never felt in version 1, and obviously don't feel right now. I just feel like it's more of like a light guidance setup here with this one, whereas this one, I just felt like this is the shape that I feel like, kind of like holding my foot. And the flexibility aspect of that, it was quite noticeable. I typically don't like a shoe that overly holds the foot and kind of doesn't allow it to move as freely around the middle of the shoe. So that part it made it feel a little bit firmer, because I don't feel like my foot was able to adapt quite as much as in this shoe right here. It just felt a little bit more solid landing on the ground, and this may be preferable for some. Maybe if you don't like the loosest kind of feel of version 1, you may like just like locking into that solid landing under the middle of the foot and like limiting any type of twisting or anything of the foot over the ground underneath you. And that's definitely noticeable in here, and it's just totally different than version 1, the feel underfoot. This feels a lot looser underfoot, and this one feels just way more controlled. Flexibility was another aspect. As I was running, I was feeling some slight pulling on my Achilles and lower calves that I never noticed in version 1, and that's always to me an indication of a stiffer shoe around the middle. You're climbing up and the shoe is stiff, so your leg is like fighting to kind of pull it up, and it's putting tension on this area right here. And I definitely felt that slightly in version 2 that I never felt in version 1. So it's just a really different setup. I'm kind of surprised that they changed it up so much here. Have some concluding thoughts. Hold on a sec. So obviously just one run in so far in this new SLAB Genesis 2. I'm gonna have more detailed review coming down the line, also comparisons of course, but my initial, let's say, conclusion on this shoe based on one run again is that version 1 to me felt like it was a borderline ultra shoe. Courtney ran this shoe obviously in plenty of long distance ultra races. Now, she's a pro athlete, obviously. It's possible that she might have had slightly bulked up versions, but she was also running in those SLAB ultra versions, which were also quite thin. So maybe she just runs in a thinner shoe. Again, this right shoe that I have on my foot right now, version 1, it's like 20 millimeters under the forefoot, which is quite thin to be running some of those super long ultras that she has run and done very well in, obviously. So it just, to me, felt like a borderline long distance shoe. It had the comfort. The feel of the foam was a little bit softer, especially under the heel, I would say. So in a lot of those ultras, you're crashing down, you're mixing up your kind of foot strike patterns. You can crash down on that heel, on descents, but again, thin under the forefoot. So that's limiting depending on your foot strength. And I did try to run that shoe in a couple of long ultras, and those were perhaps some of the races where my feet got banged up the most. I think that I personally want to have a little bit more of that max cushion style, certainly under the forefoot. This shoe right here, coming back to my final initial conclusions here, it feels like it leans more towards the shorter distance end of the spectrum, whereas, you know, version 1 was leaning almost, if you were good, if your feet were strong, you could do a long ultra in this one. This one, the firmness of it, just the changes with the active chassis, the ground platform underfoot, it makes it more technically oriented, I think. They really amped up the protective aspect in version 2 compared to version 1. And it's not a super lightweight shoe, again, 9.6 ounces here, but you could run fast in technical terrain because you don't have to worry about the protective aspect as much with this wider, firmer platform, protective under the middle of the foot. You can really blast through some technical terrain in this shoe without really worrying about anything. And forefoot feel is quite good. 24 under the forefoot without, I'm not even sure, I have to double check if there's like one of those Pro Feel films in there, but certainly you're going to have a lot of ground feel compared to like a true plated kind of a shoe. So I feel like this lean's definitely shorter, definitely more technical, although again, coming back to V1, could be technical depending on your level of foot strength and how much ground feel you really like in a shoe. But out of the box, inherently speaking, this one is going to be more protective, and it's just going to lean in that direction. So more to come as I get more miles in this shoe. I could think of a couple shoes straight off the top of the head. Scarpa Spin Ultra 2 is one. That feel under the middle of the shoe, that firmness, that kind of stiffer feel, protective feel for alpine terrain. Alpine, Colorado, Nolan's FKT I think was run in that shoe. Certainly European alpine terrain in a shoe like this or the Spin Ultra 2. That's one comparison that really stands out to me. That's a little bit of a heavier shoe though, probably suited more towards ultra, but in a similar style of feel and protective aspect and technical terrain underfoot. A couple other lighter weight ones that I had in mind compared to version 1. We'll see if I have the same feeling if they are comparative to version 2 as I get more miles into it. So stay tuned for that. Check out Humble Running, like and subscribe. Check out the website www.humblerunning.com. Sign up for my newsletter, all that good stuff. I will see you in this one out on the trails in another video.